I work nights in Central Sterile, which means the building doesn't really see me until it needs to. Day shift calls us sterile processing, or SPD if they're in a hurry. We live between the operating rooms and the rest of the hospital like a gill between water and air. If you've never stood there after midnight, picture 3 autoclaves along one wall like chrome ovens for science, 2 washer disinfectors humming like well-behaved dishwashers, a cart washer that sighs like a subway door, and racks of blue-wrapped instrument sets that look like presents for a kind of birthday you hope never comes. There's a smell to it, hot stainless and paper indicator tape, and the soap the vendor swears is pH neutral. There's a sound to it, steam knocking in a header for a beat, then smoothing out the way a patient breath settles once the pulse ox calms down. Night shift runs the tests that make day shift legal. Bowie, Dick vacuum leak checks, biological indicators for the first pre-vac cycle, the little incubator that turns purple to yellow if you've offended the gods of sterilization. We set case carts for first starts, we pull peel packs when someone in the ER decides 2 a.m. is the correct time to need a chest set, we tuck loaner trays back into their wrappers like we're putting kids to bed. There's a window to the OR core with a pass-through that's supposed to be interlocked, on nights the interlock is a suggestion. At 0:37 I finished the Bowie, Dick on sterilizer 2 and watched the indicator sheet blossom clean, no gray flower, no cold spot, the pattern the vendor laminated onto the quick guide. I signed my name on the strip and stuck it to the log because a strip is easier to believe at 7 a.m. than a person. The washers were between loads, the cart washer was asleep with the door cracked, and the BI for the first pre-vac was incubating with the little LED breathing like a sleeping dog. Facilities likes when we say, steam to jacket 240 degrees, chamber 270 degrees, like numbers make it moral. There's a dumbwaiter, technically a vertical lift, in the corner where the OR sends us case carts on wheels when they don't want to push them through the corridor. It's older than the autoclaves, newer than the boiler, and it clunks like a teenager's first stick shift. We call it the lift. The lift has a cage door with a grate you can see your future through, and a call button that sticks in humid weather. I lean meat thermometer style over the grate sometimes to see if the cab is up by or down by us, you can hear it better than you can see it. At 0:49 the lift settled against its stop with the relieved little thud it makes when it finds itself, and the telltale light showed arrived. I hit the switch, the grate rolled up obediently, and there was a case cart inside. Wrapped, banded, sealed with a green tamper tag like a vault for linens. The tag said OR 6 first start, or THO, and it had a printed time from a day that hadn't started yet and a surgeon's name we haven't used for 6 years. He left to teach, we still use his jokes. OR 6 is out of service for modernization, new booms, new laminar flow, a dome light that won't make techs curse. We receive their construction noise when the building forgets its manner. The door has plastic and a sign that says do not enter in a typeface that tries too hard. Empty case returns happen when someone cleans a room and returns the cart instead of the load sheet. A wrapped, sealed cart is different. I cut the tag because that's what you do if something presents itself like a job. Inside. 2 blue-wrapped major sets with duplicates bands I didn't sign, 1 peel pack of light handles dated in a format we don't use anymore, a towel pack with a gusset tape that had turned dark where it should have, and a folded room checklist with small handprints in the paper the way paper remembers hands. The handwriting was the old circulating nurses, the hearts over the eyes did her in. She retired 4 Junes ago. I keep a calendar of retirements for reasons that have nothing to do with ghosts and everything to do with misshelved trays. Day shift explanations line up neat when night starts acting unprofessional. A cart could have been pulled from deep storage by a well-meaning inventory kid during day shift chaos and put on the lift by a construction crew who thought it belonged to a game of hospital Tetris. We have a mezzanine where carts go to nap and the stencils fade. The seal could be someone playing with green tags because green tags are satisfying to snap. You learn not to mythologize every quirk. You also learn to sign the unexpected in a log with a pen you trust, so I wrote 0:49, cart arrived, or 6, sealed, opened by me, because day shift likes a witness, even when the witness is a line. I was halfway through putting the trays on hold, there's a shelf by the incubator where purgatory lives, when the autoclave printer woke itself and spit 3 inches of thermal paper with the sound a receipt makes when it knows your wallet. Sterilizer 3 has a little paper window, it had printed without a cycle. The header said Prevac 270F, complete, and the load sticker area had a label I hadn't printed, the ones with the 2 color change dots for chamber and external. The date line matched tonight. The operator line said 0000, which is the default value you get if nobody logs in. We used to get that before IT decided to make login sticky. The load description field said case, ORTHO, or 6. The time stamp said 112. Sometimes thermal printers print old jobs when someone presses test or when the buffer burps. The trouble with believing in buffers is that the load label had a lot sticker with a lot number that belonged to this year's BI packs, and the dot for the external indicator had blushed brown at the exact angle it blushes when you run it through 270 degrees. If you stared at the adhesive you could see the tiny ripples the autoclave makes when it cooks a label against a tray. Those ripples are like fingerprints. I went around the front and checked the chamber. Door locked, jacket at temp, chamber cool and empty. The last real cycle had ended at 0:27, the BI run I'd started, and the printer had logged it properly with my login. I held the fresh strip next to it. The fonts matched. The dates matched. The times stuttered in a pattern I could feel more than see, 12s and 30s. If you've lived nights, you know how the building keeps old medpass times the way a church keeps bells. There's a ring-down phone on the wall by the pass-through for your desk. It rings like government. I picked it up because when Night wants to invent calls, you call back. The charge RN on the board sounded like paper gently folded. We're closed down to 1 room, she said. 6 is plastic and drywall screws. I don't have a nurse on 6. If you're seeing something that says 6, it's a ghost or a contractor. She meant minor mischief, not capital G. I told her about the cart. She laughed the laugh you do when your body wants to be afraid but your paycheck wants you to be credible. Facilities has a key to our cage, she said. Maybe someone borrowed a cart to stand on. If they send it down by mistake, collect your rental fee. The lift thumped again at 120 with the particular thunk it reserves for a cart that doesn't balance itself. I listened first, the way you listen for a baby's breathing. I hit the gate and the cart inside was empty. Not just empty. Recently empty in the way a cart tells you it was full 10 minutes ago by the grooves in its rubber and the damp heat under its handle. No tag. No seal. No note. The cab smelled like floor wax and a little like the paper they wrap light handles in. I have never been any good at pretending smell is not data. The pass-through door knocked, gentle, 2 knuckles, a human code. I slid it open because interlocks are for classes and day tours. The core beyond was unpeopled in the way a staged room is, surfaces clipped of their wires, anesthesia cables sleeping their coil sleep, the glass in the boom monitors reflecting the little clocks whose faces resemble a promise. The door 2 or 6 had plastic that breathed at the edges where tape overlaps tape, the white negative air machine's hose made a lazy S toward the ceiling. The pressure ball above the door, the one that rises to show positive pressure into the room, hung low like a weather glass. From behind the plastic, faint as a memory under a radio, I heard a recorded voice say, "Timeout complete," in the laminated tone our rooms use when an announcement needed to feel like a uniform. Recordings trip when no one wants them to, that's why recording is a verb. Vendors test voice prompts, and soundboarding leaches into ducts. Still, the timing put its thumb in the small of my back, the printer at 112, the lift at 120, the voice now like it was standing in a line. I closed the pass-through gently, because if you close things gently you get to keep them. Back at Sterilizer 3, I pulled the service screen. IT would scold me by email for not calling them, but half of my job is catching the thing before a ticket makes it to a queue. The cycle history believed it had run only the BI. No phantom cycle written to storage. The last operator, me. The log prints happen off the controller, though. A controller can lie about its past and tell the truth to a printer. I pulled the panel below the printer and reseated the ribbon cable out of habit, because reseating makes it appear you did something when you don't know what to do. The printer exhaled a little heat, which meant it had been asked to remember. The incubator beeped softly, the BI said it was time to check. I pulled the control and the test ampoules and held them to the light, control purple as bruised plums, test still purple, no yellow creeping in. I wrote past on a line that will always satisfy something in me I wish were bigger. The cart washer across the room took a breath. When it breathes warm on nights it's usually because someone in EVS ran a mop bucket through to feel powerful. I stepped to the bay and the display read cycle complete and the door gasket gave a little as it released the door like it was proud to be a door. Inside. Water lensed into beads on an empty rack. On the floor of the bay was the exact crescent of paper scraps you get when case labels dissolve and reform along a seam. If you tilted your head and wished, you could make out or 6 in the smear. I didn't tilt my head. The cart washer doesn't print. If a machine doesn't print, day shift has to take your word for it. You learn to stage your rational explanations so they take up space. Facilities could be backflushing a domestic hot water line at a tie-in above us, the temperature spike could be reading as a cycle complete, a stray bit of adhesive could be enough to trick the cart washer's eye. The lift could be letting its brake drag and deciding to visit us for company. Someone could have wheeled an old cart out during construction and sent it a timeline with tape and habit. All those are true the way a building's weather is true, and also, if you look at the clock stamps, a pattern will offer to fit you whether you agreed to be sized or not. At 1:31 the pass-through knock came again, not a knock this time but the sound of something soft contacting a hard surface. I slid the window open and a folded room checklist lay on our sill, paper facing up like a fish on a dock. I picked it up because refusing paper would be a rejection of my species. The checklist was the old version from before we changed the brand of skin prep. The prompts had the old attending's name in a field and the sticker for implants was a square instead of a rectangle. A corner of the paper had the faint brown arc you get when someone sets a hot light handle on a cold form. At the bottom, where the circulating nurse signs and writes the room, was a signature I recognized because old hands have pressure and young hands don't. The room field said 6. The time field was blank. The phone on the wall rang without introducing itself and I answered like the building was about to apologize. It was Hale from security, who owns all cameras by tone and all stairwells by birthright. "You got movement in sterile?" she asked, not alarmed. "I've got a tiny sounding thing." Construction camera picked up plastic flutter in 6 that doesn't belong to wind. I said we had plastic all right. I said we had paper. I said, if you're bored, bring your keys. Hale appeared the way she always appears at that point in my night, the first coat of paint on a panic you refuse to pick. She leaned on the pass-through and watched me because sometimes the watching is the job. She listened to the autoclave room the way a person listens at the door of a sleeping child. "And," she asked. "We call who?" "I hate candles in rooms with oxygen." "Facilities," I said. "They like to be wanted." Singh arrived with his pelican case and the face he uses on problem children, stern, then soft. He ran a temp strap on the steam header, log jacket and chamber, checked the drip legs and traps, and stood on his little ladder to open the printer panel and look like he was the sort of man who believes in ribbon cables. "Printer buffer can reissue a transaction if the RS-232 gets noise," he said, and I loved him for choosing a sentence in which no ghost could fit. He reseated. He wiped contacts like ritual. He pulled a log on the cart washer and tried a maintenance cycle, it ran through obedient as a dog made to heel. He went up to the oar while Hale and I stayed and let the lift be itself. He came back with drywall dust in his hair like someone had blessed him with an odd Ash Wednesday. "6 is cold," he said. "The negative air is running but the room's on a separate controller. The plastic is breathing because the construction fan cycles. The dumbwaiter call at our level has a broken return spring, it can register a phantom when the building shimmies. He pulled a little broken spring from his pocket like a magician proving a point. It looked exactly like what you would hope for in a story that ends here. The autoclave printer didn't print again for an hour. The lift minded its manners. Hale wrote her badge number in my log because security likes to leave a footprint when night is behaving too well. We drank coffee that tasted like something explaining itself badly. I rewrapped the trays from the cart because even if the seals were a joke the wraps shouldn't suffer for it, and my hands remembered where each fold lives better than they remember my nephew's birthdays. The BI stayed purple, the incubator breathed its little breath. At 3:12 the building ran a quiet shiver through the pipes the way a person shivers when they think of aspirin and then decide they don't need it. The pass-through was closed and stayed closed. The lift did not thump. The cart washer did not clear its throat. The printer ticked once and stopped like a person deciding not to interrupt. Hale said, out loud to the room where the voice could record us, "We're not doing 6 tonight." The negative air fan behind the plastic made a sound like ordinary weather. We all watched the second hand on the wall clock move past 12 the way you watch a door you hope won't open. Day shift ate it like a joke with a flavor they couldn't name. IT pulled the autoclave controller logs and wrote back gently that nothing spoke to anything at those minutes except my BI. The OR nurse manager left a voicemail in which she used the word gremlins, with a charity I appreciate. Facilities taped a new spring onto the dumbwaiter call and a date onto the tape that meant we don't have to talk about this again. The vendor for the cart washer sent a PDF that contained the word nuisance in a tone I reserve for paper cuts. The surgical services director printed my log and put it under a magnet that says thank you for a day. I kept the checklist because paper is cheap and memory is not. I folded it back the way I found it and slid it into the gap between the incubator and the wall, which is where the night keeps its wallet. If you leave a strip there too long the heat prints its ghost on the paint. The next night the printer behaved and the lift minded its hinge and the autoclaves did not imagine themselves being of use when no one asked. I told the building, out loud and soft, "We're doing 5 cases and none of them are 6, and the building agreed like a friend being kind. You want a better ending than this. You want a door to slam or a thermometer to break and bleed its red down chrome. Nights don't give you that because days need something to sign. Here is what I know with my hands more than my head, the minutes hid inside the 12s and 30s the way the med pass used to, the card arrived sealed like a joke told too long, the sticker blushed in a way ink cannot. Here is what I also know because this building has paid me to know it, buffers burp, buttons stick on their spindles, printers spit when someone rattles a harness above a soffit and a room can breathe through plastic because someone asked it to be born again with cleaner air. Sometimes when the washers settle and the BI screen LED does its slow inhale, exhale and the only other sound is that small steam knock a trap makes before it remembers how to behave, I sit on the edge of the steel table by the pass-through and rest the soles of my shoes on the rung the way a child would and I say, not 6, and I promise to be the kind of person who signs the strip in pen where everyone can see it. Most nights the lift stays up with OR's ghosts and the printer turns quiet as a good secret. On the ones when it doesn't, I open the gate and take what arrives and I cut a green tag and I look at the hands paper remembers and I put things on a purgatory shelf until the sun pretends this was never a story, just a sequence of maintenance tasks, which is a kind of absolution that still counts as real. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this crazy Reddit story. If this one made you laugh, trust me, there are plenty more where that came from. So do me a favor, smash that like button, drop a comment with your own funniest experience, and of course, hit that big red subscribe button. That way, you'll never miss the wildest, weirdest, and most hilarious Reddit chaos we bring to life every week. Stick with us, because the next story might just be even crazier than this one.